Well, my girlfriend sure did surprise me yesterday when she suggested, why don't we just buy a cheap house in Japan to live in? I didn't see that coming because prior to that we hadn't really spoken about it. However, I had been sending through Instagram the beautiful photos of a really cheap property every now and again that would pop up. And tell you what, it works. Planting the seed, and with time, the idea starts to bloom. If you're not aware of the phenomenon of cheap homes in Japan, this is the episode for you. My name is Kurt Provost. Welcome to Exit West. This is the channel where we explore the crisis the West is experiencing right now and take a look at opportunities and options outside of the West. In particular, this episode is inspired by our search for our own home here in Australia and finding extremely overpriced, inferior quality buildings that we will be paying off for the rest of our lives. And that's just not that appealing. So when there are options like what we're exploring right now in Japan, I think for some people could make a lot of sense. So what's the deal with Japan? Why are properties so cheap there? Well, not all properties. There are many properties there that are insanely expensive. Exactly the same as Australia, if not more so, depending on the area. There is a different demographic occurring in Japan, though, and that is the rapidly aging population, and they're simply not having enough babies to replace this population, so they are experiencing population decline, have been for quite a while now, and it's not looking like it's going to change anytime soon. In fact, the population of roughly 125 million Japanese is set to be around 87 million by 2070. That's a lot of vacant homes because obviously as these homes lose their occupants, there's no one to replace them. There's no one to repair them and maintain them and pay the fees on them. And so they just sit vacant. And this is called Akiya. They are vacant homes, roughly 9 million of them in Japan currently, and that will definitely grow. It's looking like it will make up about 30% of the property market in the next few years, and that's a huge percentage. Just a lot of empty homes lying around. It's going to have huge consequences on what Japan will look like in the future. So it's probably not the best investment. I mean, they're cheap for a reason. However, it is very attractive to people like myself who have, let's say, an independent income stream. We can make money online, so it doesn't necessarily matter where we are in the world. And if we could find something that would suit our lifestyle at a much lower price to what it is here in Australia or in the US or in Europe, then it makes sense to spend a portion of our lives in Japan if they will have us. That is the catch there. Number one, foreigners can own property and land in Japan. That's great news. And a lot of foreigners are doing exactly that, and they're sharing how they do it. So there's a wealth of information out there which we'll go through shortly. But number two, and this is the downside or one of the downsides of the Akiya movement in Japan, is that Japan doesn't make it necessarily easy for you to get long-term residence just by buying a property. It's not like other countries, Serbia, for example. If you purchase property, by the way, you can check out this video where I go into how to get residency in Serbia. If you purchase property, that's one of the ways, and you'll gain long-term residence there, and you can stay there as long as you like. And that's something that's really valuable, and you have a pathway to citizenship as well. In Japan, it's not like that. So if you're from a Western nation, you've generally got about 3 to 6 months on a tourist visa. Now, for some people, that could be enough, and you're happy to do visa runs, or you just want to spend 6 months of the year in Japan throughout certain seasons, and the rest of the time outside of Japan. Failing that, you can get student visas. You can gain employment visas if you can get sponsorship there. There are pathways to get residency. It's just not simple. It's not easy. And it's not through purchasing property. So with that out of the way, let's take a look at what's actually involved in getting your own cheap home, and is it a viable option for you?
Okay, so first things first is you want to have a little bit of an idea of where in Japan you would like to go. It definitely helps if you've been there before. You probably have a very good idea of the areas that you would like to spend more time in. So the best way to do that is, of course, you can use the internet, but the best way is just to go to Japan when you are next able to and explore around, see what's happening. So in the meantime, you can read through things like this one. I found this site really helpful. So, cheap houses in Japan. There's a ton of sites out there that you can use. There's so many people that are taking advantage of this and they're sharing the knowledge and building businesses around it. So, you know what? Fair enough. You've got to have an income somehow when you are living in a cheap house in Japan. So, here's four things you should know before buying a cheap house in Japan. First off, what is an Akiya? We've already covered that. Empty house. And some prefectures see almost 20% of all housing stock is lying empty, which is a lot. So they have created these things called Akiya Banks, and this is going to become your best friend because Akiya Banks are run by the local prefecture, so the local council government, and they will help to organize a lot of the listings on there. Not everything will be listed, but they will make it more manageable so that we can find these properties. Now, many of them are in Japanese, some are in English, but you can always just use Google Chrome extension and hit the translate page and it will translate it for you like I have done with this page. Uh, so I'll turn that back into Japanese. That's what it looked like before, and then I just hit English and that's what it looks like now. So you can still navigate. It's technology definitely helps us. So the reason why Akiya Banks exist is because real estate agents, they work off a 3% commission, so they're capped in how much they can earn. Obviously they want to sell the most expensive thing possible because that's how they earn the most money. However, Akiyas are usually very cheap. So look at this one here, $24,000. You can get them for free as well. Some of them sell for $500. So it's not worth the time and energy necessary for the real estate agent to show you around and to put all the work necessary into helping to sell that property. So that they're usually kind of passed over and just ignored. And fair enough, I can totally understand that. So that's why the banks have come in. They're not an actual bank; it's just a database. And thankfully, they are quite honest about the how much work will be involved. As you can see here, it's a bit of a dump, and as it says on the site, that it will require a renovation. So how much do they cost? Well, they vary from something that is quite low up to, a couple of 100,000 even. So it all depends, and you've got to do a lot of due diligence. Here are the four things that you need to know. I found these really useful and really key ideas. So renovation costs on IKEA can be steep because many of them are traditional homes. So they're saying those that are under 15,000 US dollars are usually in very poor condition. They've been abandoned for a long time, a lot of neglect. They're traditionally made of wood, so you want to check for evidence of termite or structural damage. You want to check the plumbing and electricity because it'll probably need updating to more modern standards. And you want to make sure that the property meets the current earthquake resistance building standards, so current things like that, because all of that has changed since many of these homes have been built. Like you look at the more traditional one, it's not so much, but anyhow, a lot of different standards that have come through, and you've got rotting tatami mats and all this sort of stuff. So the Japanese traditional style roofs, kawara, I butchered that. Roofing tiles, they're prone to cracking and leaking over time if not regularly maintained. So you can end up with a lot of water damage as a result. So that's going to be very costly repairs. So that's why you want to get someone who's going to be checking it out for you. A building inspector will be well worth the money, I believe. And there's also the case that if you have a property that has land, farmland, then there's government agencies that can dictate in some instances what you do with that land. And they may expect you to be permanently working the land, and you may have a different plan for it. Maybe you just want to have a garden and you just want to look at the farm but not do the farm work. So it all depends on the property. Every property is different. So there's extra fees and taxes. This is an interesting one because they list here additional one-off fees, taxes, and regular taxes can be sizable when buying the property. There's a registration tax, and there is different government criteria. So all sorts of different expenses. The fees alone could cost you as much as 4,000 US dollars. Now, here in Australia, that sounds really cheap for fees because our fees were way more than that when we bought property in Australia, and it's just throwing money away. So, yeah, I don't like fees all that much, but they sound somewhat manageable. So be careful of sneaky contract requirements that are specific to IKEA. So there are sometimes different specifications for that IKEA. Like you may have to live there permanently, and you don't legally have the ability to do that yet until you go through the process of setting up residency. So you have to make sure that that's not in the contract. So you need someone to look through it. You want to make sure that you're buying the property and the land freehold, you're not leasehold, because sometimes it's just the structure that you're buying that you own, but you're actually leasing the land. And there's a 20-year lease or a 99-year lease, like Hong Kong did with the British there. So all these sort of things you need to make sure that's not in the contract. You've got to make sure it's real airtight because there can be some really surprising things in there. And the fourth one is to keep in mind that natural disasters happen in Japan. They happen everywhere, but in particular in Japan, they are on the fault line and the ring of fire. So there is a lot of seismic activity there. There's tsunamis. There's a lot of consequences from those two things right there. And structures don't generally like being shook too much. So you've got to make sure that whatever it is that you're building is going to withstand that, and that it's built to the codes that are current because, as we said before, there's a whole lot of different stuff. So what they recommend here is don't buy a cheap IKEA. Instead, buy this, and that is to buy a reasonable but still cheap by international standards house that's in great condition that has been built recently. So they're saying just find, the other cheap properties that are still affected by the exact same things that are creating the whole abundance of IKEAs, which is the declining population. That's still affecting other properties and making the prices lower. So you could find something that's a slightly higher quality like the ones they picture here, but for a reasonable price. So we've got 29,000 for that beautiful structure right there, 90,000 for this one, 32,000 for this one, 55,000 for that one, 23,000 for this one, 44,000. You get the idea. There's a lot of beautiful properties that won't necessarily require a huge amount of work, but you can get them for a reasonable price. So this is something that I am more interested in, something paying a bit more money to get something that is not a massive headache, unless I want to dedicate the next couple of years to doing up a property in Japan, which could be a very interesting adventure. Who knows? There is something to keep in mind here that, obviously here at Exit West, we see the geopolitical situation happening. And I think that's something that's key to be aware of with Japan, is that it's definitely in the Western hemisphere of influence, and the East is rising right now, and the BRICS plus nations are doing really well, and nearby potential hot areas like Taiwan could be potential future conflict here. And if you're in Okinawa, for example, you're very close. Like down here, this is all Japanese territory here. So there could be potential conflict there. I'm noticing just watching some Korean TV series recently that there is quite a surprising amount of, well, not that surprising when you understand the history, but a reasonable amount of anti Japanese sentiment there. There's anti Japanese sentiment in China, Korea, and so there's kind of shifting geopolitical dynamics to keep in mind. Having said all of that, I absolutely love Japan. It's an amazing country, and I would love to spend more time there. So let's go for an actual search and see what we can find. So I typed in here Hokkaido. Really loved Hokkaido. I loved every part of Japan, but Hokkaido is more kind of wilderness, more rural, countryside. I put buying property. I clicked Akiya Bank only. So that's just sourcing the properties that are listed on the different Akiya banks, of which there are many. I'll just quickly show you the top 6 ones. So Akiya Inaka, that's a business that's set up that's totally tailored to foreigners. I found some useful information there. So I am on right now. What am I on? Akiya Japan. And then I'm setting the price at 50,000 US as the maximum because I just want to narrow down. I don't want to have thousands of properties to go through. Let's see what comes up for Hokkaido. So let's click on this one first. 46,000. Let's have a look at that. Do you want me to sign up? No, I don't want to sign up. Okay, that looks pretty good. They don't have, sometimes they have a lot of photos and other times not so much. I like the garden. Very cool. All right, let's X out of that and have a look at the details. 654 square meters for 46,000 or 7 million Japanese yen. Let's have a look at what that is currently in US dollars. Currently 45,000 US dollars. So the Japanese yen has been dropping, which makes money go a bit further, which is great. Not a lot of information here, but you can make an inquiry, and it's located in the city center. Let's have a look at the map. Oh, wow. That's so it's in the city of Haburo. Wow, what a location. So for 50,000 US, 45,000 US, you can have a property that is in the center of town, in a coastal city, small town, that has how many bedrooms? It looked like at least 3, if not more, many more. Can't find the bedrooms. Yeah, let's move on to another one, otherwise this video will be incredibly boring. Let's see what we've got here. Block of $400. That can't be right. Oh, good. They got a picture of a bathtub there. Very detailed. Okay, there is zero information for this one, but apparently you can buy this for $400. Possibly. It's a bit remote. It's in a country area, but it's $400. Maybe that's the one for you. Particularly if you like the snow, Hokkaido is the place to be. Here we go. Oh my god. 6,600. Let's see what that gets you. Well, that's an interesting designed house. Doesn't look like wood from the outside, but yeah, that's a lot of wood. Actually looks in reasonable, the skeleton looks in reasonable condition. Not the best bathroom. I wonder how much land comes with that. So you've got what looks like an unfinished house. 6,500.
So what do you think, guys? Is that a good option for you? Keep in mind there are no perfect places out there. Everywhere has its pros and cons, but I do believe that there could be somewhere that is perfectly suited for you. Let's go on an adventure to find that place together. So hit that subscribe button, leave a comment below with your thoughts on Akiya and whether or not Japan is a great option for you. I'm really curious to hear what you guys have to say about this particular topic as I explore it much further for myself as well. I'll see you in a future video updating you about the different residencies and options that are available outside of the West. Ciao, guys.